I love watching birds.
Oddly enough, I like watching birds too.
Well, I mainly like pelicans.
Yeah, I thought I would just interrupt there because it's time for another fountain pen shootout. And today we'll be having a look at a whole flock of pelicans, and I have long been looking forward to do this video. We are going to cover pretty much every pelican that is made and available right now. There are some exceptions, for example the Pelican M320. That is a very small pocket pen. I do not own that, but that's a pocket pen, so you really buy that with the purpose of having a pocket pen. All the ones I will review today are full-size, normal-size pens. Now I have separate reviews of all these pens on my channel, but I thought that today we just do a quick comparison. Now there's a bunch of them, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 pens. I will not show you how to take them apart. The ones that I can disassemble are added to the disassembly line, such as the M1000, the M800. Alright, so just to save some time, I'm just going to go through them. Let's start with the very first one. This was actually the first Pelican I bought, the Pelican M205. This was a highlighter pen, supposed to be used with highlighter ink, that's why it's yellow too. There is now also a green version, but back in the day there was only this one. It has a steel double broad nib, and I got it with an additional medium nib too. As you can see, all these pens are piston fillers, so they hold a decent amount of ink. This one I've always enjoyed, although it is not the biggest pen out there. If you use it unposted, for me that's pushing a little bit the limits of what I can use unposted. Now I also have an M200 Tradition. This is a clear version of the one I've just shown you, so this does not have that yellow tint. Now what I have on here is actually a pen that was altered a bit by a Nibmeister. Richard Binder turned this into a 0.7 millimeter cursive italic, and this is a very interesting nib to use. It was sent to me by a viewer. I like this pen too, but it gives a whole different writing experience from the other one. Originally I think I had a broad on this, or something like that. That was not really spectacular, just a nice nib. And this is an example of how a Nibmeister can really add something to your writing experience. Of course, I'm going to show you writing examples of all these pens. Alright, what we have here is a Pelican. This is a vintage Pelican, and this is a 400 M400 Souverain. I was just checking my notes here because there's so many Pelicans and there's two very dark vintage ones, so I had to check which one was which. This one is interesting because first of all it has an oblique double broad 14 karat gold nib. You can see the oblique shape of the nib. If you don't know what that is, I have a video on specialty nibs that explains what it is, but basically a nib cut at a slanted angle. You can't really see it very well, but this pen actually has gray striations, so it's actually a very dark gray, whereas most people, when I think of Pelican pens, probably think of this type of green striation. Quite nice. 400N. An interesting nib. It says HEF, and I am sorry, this is the oblique double broad. This one is a 400N, and this one has a nib labeled HEF, which I assume stands for hard extra fine. Another 14 karat gold nib, and I think the H stands for hard because it has absolutely no flex whatsoever, and in my experience many Pelican inks, both vintage and modern, actually have quite some springiness to them, and some of the vintage ones definitely offer full flex, that is, have the springiness to do flex writing. Okay, so this one is all black, and you see a little bit of translucency at the top there, but you really have to hold it up to the light to be able to see that, because otherwise it looks like it's a completely black pen. Alright, then we move on to a pen I bought at the one time I went to the DC Pen Super Show. This is a 400 NN. So it's this, you know, guys, this is a whole field in itself. You have the 400N, then you have, so that's the gray striated one I've shown you. Then you have the 400NN, you have the M400. People have made entire charts of this online. You can check it out. The 400NN, as I understand it, has this rounded off end cap, and this is a special one. You can find a lot of them quite cheaply. And then they have the green finish. This one actually has the tortoiseshell brown finish, which I think is a very attractive finish. I don't know how well you can see it, but this one too, slightly translucent if you hold it up to the light, making it a very nice pen. This has a 14 karat gold nib. This is an extra fine, but the beauty of it is it has a lot of springiness to it, so you can really use this for flex writing, and that's what I'm going to show you in the writing sample. Okay, so these were vintage pens, the last three I've shown you. This is a modern made Pelican. This is also a 400. This is a Souverain. So here you enter the Souverain range, which the 200 and the 320 are not, but this one is. And this is a Souverain M400. This is also tortoiseshell. You're probably going to recognize the material, but this one has white highlights, making for a very, very attractive pen. This is a 14 karat double broad. You see this nice two-tone nib, and this was stubbed by John Mottershaw, another nibmeister. So again, the writing experience that you would get with this pen has been enhanced by having an expert work on the nib, turn it into something just a little bit different to add some extra line variation, give it a somewhat more expressive character as a nib. Alright, then we have something that was recently sent to me by the pen company, and that kind of completed my flock of Pelikans. This is an M600, and the M600 actually moves up a little bit from the M400. Interesting bit of trivia that was pointed out to me. I did not know this, but it was pointed out to me. The M200 and the M400 are pretty much the same size. The only thing that's slightly different is some of the trimmings, and mainly the nib. The Souverain pens, the M400 range, has gold nibs as far as I know, and the M200 range has steel nibs or gold plated nibs. So with the Souverain range, the M400 range, you move up a step, but it's not the case that the M400 is bigger than the M200. However, once you get to the M600 from the M400 or the M200, you move up a step. You get, I think, officially gilded trimmings, so clips, etc., which the low range does not have, and you start to get into solid gold nibs. This one has a double broad nib, and as I understand, Pelican is going to reduce production of these more extreme nib sizes, so they're going to focus on fines and mediums as opposed to broad, double broad, obliques, etc., which is a huge pity, because that is actually one of the main attractions of Pelican, that they offer so many nib options. Okay, so here you have another 14 karat nib, double broad, another beautiful two-tone nib. So that's what you get with an M600. Now if you move up one step, you go to the M800, and from M600 to M800, that is again just a little bit of a step up when it comes to size. You get a little bit more girth as well as a little bit more length. I'm trying to align this properly so that you can see. So you can see it just moves up a little bit, and then just for size, so that I don't have to put this all down, pick it up again, you have the M1000, which again is just a little bit of a step up. Okay, we were talking about the M800. This is a special edition of the M800 in tortoiseshell brown again, a very beautiful finish. This one, like the other ones, is also a little bit translucent. It's a little hard to see because I have a fairly dark brown ink in here, but I can definitely see it when I hold it up to the light. The nice thing is that you have these stripes on the Pelikans, and then when you hold it up to the light, you can see that between the stripes is actually a clear material, which is beautiful because as all of these pens are piston fillers, if a pen is not clear, you have no idea how much ink you have left. And this way, before you go to a meeting or whatever, you can have a quick check to see how much ink you have left. Okay, with the M800 range, you move into the area of 18 karat gold nibs. Does it really matter? For some people it does, for some people it doesn't. What I can tell you is this is a triple broad. That's the broadest nib that I think Pelican makes. 18 karat gold, very lovely. I really like this nib. But even though it's triple broad, don't expect a huge calligraphy nib. I still find it very usable for everyday writing. Alright, and the final step up, the flagship model Pelican makes, is the M1000. And this, in all honesty, is one of my favorite pens of all time. For me, great size, unposted. Posted it gets a little scary, but this truly is an oversized pen, nice ink capacity, and a beautiful, beautiful two-tone 18 karat gold nib. Now, just to give you an idea, I'm just going to, just to be fair, I'm going to use the M400, not the M200, just to give you an idea of the difference in nib sizes between these two pens. So on top here you have the M400, and down there you have an M1000, which is definitely a big difference. Alright, so the final pen I'm going to show you is an M1005. Often with Pelikans, the ones ending in 5s are special editions. M205 was a special edition of the M200, and the M1005 was a special edition of the M1000. As you can see, this is a clear pen. You can see all the parts of the pen. This has rhodium trimmings, but it has an 18 karat solid gold nib. It just has this sort of silver color because of the rhodium. But I love how you can really see everything in here. You can see the ink sloshing around. You can see the piston mechanism. It's a really interesting pen to use, and that really shows you the workings of the pen. Alright, and also this one, oops, sorry, let me refocus there. Also, this pen has a fairly springy nib, which I'm going to show you in the writing sample. This one, by the way, is a double broad nib on mine, and that too has a lot of spring to it. So, the purpose of this video is not to tell you which one to buy, because that's your choice. That'll depend obviously on your budget, also on the size of your hands. I mean, if you go for an M1000, that's a lot of pen. Here to there is about 8 inches, so it's a serious pen. If you have small hands, probably not very useful for you. You may be much happier with an M600 or even M400. Nib-wise, I think Pelican makes some of the nicest nibs that are currently available on the market. Very pleasant to use, very consistent ink flow. I have noticed some skipping behavior on very smooth paper. Then you should ask yourself, which pen doesn't occasionally skip on very smooth paper? And bear in mind that I use a lot of broad nibs, which are more prone to baby's bottom syndrome, so over polishing of the nib tines. You see the same with Mont Blanc, at least I do, and many manufacturers suffer from the same issue. So that's a whole flock of Pelikans. More than enough talk. What you need to see is all these pen in action. That's what we're going to do now. Let's uncap some pens and have some fun. Guys, I hope this was useful. I hope the writing sample is going to be useful to give you an idea of the overview of nib ranges from extra fine to triple broad, oblique double broad, etc. And I'll gladly see you later. Bye bye. Okay guys, so here we go with this writing sample. This is going to be a whole flock of Pelikans. So here we have the Pelican M205 Duo. Now there is also a green one, but back in the day there was only this yellow one. It came with a double broad nib, and it's supposed to be used with highlighter ink, but of course you can put any ink you like in it. This is Platinum Mix-Free Sunny Yellow, and this is a double broad nib. I am using Rhodia paper, as you can see. It's a nice wet nib, but with this nib I have had a couple of startup issues. You can see that here and there too, that there's a little bit of a skip, but in all I do find it a very pleasant pen to use. It's a decent size, fairly small, easy to carry. Okay, the next one we have is a Pelican Tradition. This is the M200. And this one has a 0.7mm Richard Binder cursive italic. You want to write down CI. And these nibs are really supposed to give you some line variation, but not be so sharp that it's uncomfortable to write with, because their corners will cut into the paper. Now, as you can see, there are a couple of skips here too, and I think that is the M200 feed that is doing this, because I have the same thing with the M205 as you've just seen, but in any case, this ink is a Caran d'Ache Caribbean Sea. Okay, now these have been relatively, this was a relatively fine nib. Let's try something different here. Here you have a 400N. This is a vintage model, and this has an oblique double broad. The ink here is Rohrer und Klingner Altgoldgrün. And here we move into the gold nib range. So where this was gold plated and this was steel, here we have a solid gold nib that actually sings quite nicely. And I find this a fairly sharply cut italic. Sorry, oblique. It really has an angle to it. Alright, now what we have here is a Pelican 400NN in black, and this one has an HEF, and as far as I know that stands for hard extra fine, but I could be wrong. The ink is Diamine Ancient Copper. And indeed, this nib offers very little line variation. If you compare this, so I think that confirms my hard impression. This is an oblique double broad, so it will have some line variation just because it's an oblique, but under pressure you see it actually opens up quite a bit. 14K. And this is also a 14K nib. Okay, now we move on to another 400NN. This is a very light ink, Diabolo Mont, I'm sorry. This is an extra fine nib, but the joy of this is the fact that it flexes a lot, and I really like that. Now this is a 400 NN in the tortoise shell brown. Another 400 that's also tortoise is the and this is a modern pen. This is the Souverain M400 in white tortoise. This is a 14 karat double broad, but it was stubbed by John Mottershaw. So this actually gives a nice amount of line variation just because of the shape of the nib. And this is Jonathan Swift Seaweed Green, although maybe he was also greedy, I don't know. What is nice about this nib is, of course, it is nib meistered. A person actually customized this nib, but it writes very nicely, and the extra line variation is a very nice feature. Just because it adds a bit more character to your handwriting, but as said, you need someone to actually do that for you. Okay, then we have the Pelican Souverain M600 in the red finish. This is also a double broad, and this is the this is Pelikan Edelstein Garnet, the ink. And this, I have to say, this is also a 14 karat nib, just like the previous pen, and this offers a very pleasant writing experience. Very smooth, and unlike the M200 nibs, I really don't find this nib to skip. Now that could also be a property of the ink as well as the paper, but I have used this pen on a couple of types of paper and I haven't really found it to skip a lot. So that's very nice. Alright, now the broadest nib in the range is what I have here. This is a Pelikan M800, also a Souverain. This is Mont Blanc Toffee Brown ink, and this is a triple broad nib, and here we have moved into the 18 karat gold range. And I absolutely love this pen. The size, the nib, it's really, really pleasant. This is another one that I haven't really found to skip, and although it is very broad, I haven't found any traces of baby's bottom in here, so over polishing of the nib tines. This is no pressure, this is with quite some pressure, and I just for fun wanted to compare that. I will use the extra fine. I know it's a little hard to see because of the ink, so I'm going to zoom in. This is the vintage 400 NN. This is extra fine, no pressure, and full pressure, and that's the funny thing. Here you see how much broader the triple broad is as compared to the extra fine line, but you can also see how much flex this nib actually offers and how easily it opens up, and what an excellent ink flow it has. One really has to enjoy these flex 14K nibs. Okay, well, we are getting somewhere. We're almost done going through this whole range of pens. Here we have my M1000, the flagship of the Pelikan Souverain range, in an unaltered double broad nib. And this is again Rohrer und Klingner Alt Goldgrün ink, and this is one of my favorite pens of all time. I find it an extremely pleasant nib to use, very, very smooth, offers no resistance on smooth paper like this Rhodia. Especially on smoother paper, there may be the occasional skip, as you just saw there, but on most papers I found this pen to perform very, very well. That's another 18 karat gold nib. Okay, finally I have this M1005. That is the demonstrator version of the M1000. Pelican nibs are known to be a little above average in springiness. This is a fine, but, and by the way, the ink is Mont Blanc Honoré de Balzac, the dandy turquoise. I'm using it without pressure. And it's quite smooth, pleasant to use. And if we try to push that nib a little bit, now you can see that there is quite some impressive line variation to be had. So there you have it. From one of the smallest to one of the biggest Pelikans. It's just an overview. I hope this has given you an idea of the various nib options, extra fine to triple broad. There's obliques. You can have a lot of fun. Of course, you can have your nib reground by a Nibmeister. A lot of options you have. I hope this has given you an idea of what the different pens are like when they write. And guys, I gladly see you later. Bye bye.